moment of our conception, we are born in intimate communion with God, who created us in love, and we will die into the loving arms of God, who loves us with an everlasting love. I am ashamed to say that it took me some time to move from thinking that Adam, far from being primarily physically and mentally challenged and therefore not my equal, was in fact my brother. He was a full human being, so fully human that he was chosen by God to become the instrument of his love. Adam's vulnerability gave space for the heart. Adam, for me, became just heart, the heart in which God chose to dwell, in which he wanted to speak to those who came close to Adam's vulnerable heart. And I understood, too, what I had learned in Latin America a few years earlier about God's preferential option for the poor. Indeed, God loves the poor, and God loved Adam very specially. He wanted to dwell in Adam's broken body so that he could speak from that vulnerability into the world of strength and call people to become vulnerable and to offer their brokenness to God in ministry. Finally, Adam taught me something about community. Doing things together is more important than doing things alone. I came from a world concerned with doing things on one's own, but here was Adam, so weak and vulnerable and dependent on others. And I couldn't help Adam alone. We both needed all sorts of people. At L'Arche Daybreak, we had people from Brazil, the United States, Canada, and Holland, young and old, living together in one house around Adam and other handicapped people. As the weakest link among us, Adam created community. He brought us together. His needs and his vulnerability made us into a true and loving community. With all our differences, we could not have survived as a community if Adam hadn't been there. His weakness became our strength, our rallying point. That's what I learned from Adam, God's beloved son. I lived at Daybreak 10 years before Adam died. His story is my story of weakness, vulnerability, and dependency, but also of strength, authenticity, and giftedness. Can you dare to believe that God's story about you puts your story in spiritual perspective? One way to do this is to write down your personal story without editing out your vulnerability and brokenness, and to be willing to tell your story to others. This is the discipline of witness in the world. Here's how I would tell my sacred story, trusting in the truth of God's story of me. My history with God. At the core of my faith belongs the conviction that I am a beloved child of God. If I were to draw a line on a flip chart, I would say, that's my life, my little chronology, my little clock time. I was born in 1932, and I wonder where the end point will be. Maybe 2010, maybe earlier. A few more years are really all I have. Life goes by very, very fast. My first 24 years of life were basically years to prepare myself for the Catholic priesthood. I was born and raised in a Roman Catholic family, went to Roman Catholic schools, and lived a life in which I related exclusively to Roman Catholics. It was a time in which all the boundaries were clear. I was a Roman Catholic and not a Protestant. I was Christian and not Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu. I was a believer and not a pagan. I was a man and not a woman. I was Dutch and not German, French, or English. I was white and not black, etc. These very clear boundaries gave me a sense of being in the right place, being wholly protected, and being very safe. I never met anybody who was divorced, who had left the priesthood, or who was gay. It was very clear what I was going to do as a priest. I knew the right teaching and the right way to live the moral life. 6 years in the seminary had given me very clear-cut guidelines and surrounded me with people who had received the same guidelines. Proclaiming the gospel and administering the sacraments were challenging but not complicated.